Hi, this is Ember, and this is my tutorial on how to frost a cake. Okay, once you have everything set up, you want to make sure you have your cake board. If you're going to torte your cake, which means you're going to make thinner layers, then you have to make sure that's done first. And then you want to be able to marry your cake to the board. So take your frosting and put it on your board. The reason why you want to do this is if you don't, your cake may have a tendency to slide right off. And then decide how you want to put this on. I have a really handy cake holder that I like to use, and it just lifts your cake so you don't have to worry about it breaking or tearing. And then I just transfer it to another spot. And then I take my piece that I'm going to use, and then I will lift it up. It's pretty moist, so if you're nervous about transferring it, you can actually partially freeze it. And then you take this, and you want to make sure that the cake is the top side. So the top, when you take it out of the oven, is the top side. And you want to be able just to put it on your board, just like that. Okay, next thing you want to do is you want to be able to frost this part right here. Doing that, just take your frosting. I'm using cream cheese frosting. It's a more difficult frosting to work with. It's a lot softer, and you'll notice that when you're spreading, you want to just do a rocking motion with your angled spatula, and you just want to rock it and push it out towards the edge of your cake. You have to be careful doing this because you can tear it, and like I said, if you're worried about that, make sure it's partially frozen, and that will actually prevent it from tearing. And you just want to kind of keep going till the outer edges of your cake, until you're all the way around, just like this. Next, what you want to do is you want to take your tip. This is a pretty big tip, and this is called damming the cake, and you just want to go around the edge of your cake. The reason to do this is so that you can prevent any kind of filling from seeping out. And it's just like that. And then for my filling this time, I'm using some raspberry syrup that I got from Great Harvest. It's a really good syrup. It's pretty runny, as you'll see. And you want to be very careful on how much you pour on your cake, because if you overdo it, it can overflow. And then you just kind of spread it out to the edges, just like this. Once you have that, I'm actually adding a filling to mine. And I'm using raspberries. I'm breaking these raspberries up into pieces, and I'm just laying them sporadically around the cake for my filling. Okay, once that's done, again, you don't want to overfill it, just enough to sporadically, because once you cut the cake, it's going to divide it the way it needs to be. Then you take your next piece. I'm actually alternating this with chocolate. And you just line it up, and very carefully, this can be tricky, just wiggle it on. Alrighty, and then the same step as you repeat with your frosting. Nice big dollop. Then you want to start in the middle and do with a rocking motion. Gently turn your turntable if you have one. If not, then you just do it the other way. And you just kind of keep going up to the edges. You'll notice that the center is pretty moist, and so it's going to crumb. And crumbing means that the crumbs are just going to show through the frosting. That's okay, especially on a centerpiece when it's filling like this. Just be careful that you're not lifting up, because you can actually lift the cake off. If you don't have enough frosting, just put a little bit more on, and then continue till it's all covered. And then repeat the process until you have the layers that you need. Something that I forgot to mention is if you are using a syrup thin layer, if you are not using a syrup and you're using something like a pie filling, it's a thicker material, so you can fill it a little bit more full, but you do not go above the part on the outside rim where you dammed it, because if you go above that, it will actually seep out and go on the outside of your cake, and that's what you don't want. Okay, I'm ready to put my final layer on. You want to make sure it's the bottom of the cake, what comes out of the cake pan on the bottom, so it's a flat top. And then you'll just want to slide it on, like I showed you before. And then you've got your 4 layers, and I alternated the layers so it would add more color and dimension. And then you want to do the same thing with your frosting. Is you want to start at the top, a nice generous dollop. Frosting's pretty heavy, so you'll notice it'll settle a little bit. And I want to start with a nice big dollop so that it will spread out over the sides of the cake. Same thing, rocking motion. And you want to just kind of edge it around. It's probably going to fall over the side a little bit, which is fine. Now this particular cake, I'm actually going to cover it in chocolate ganache also. So I'm not too worried about any kind of frosting showing through. And I'm doing a thinner layer of this frosting because otherwise it's way too sweet. Once you have the top and it's all flowing over like that, you just start to use your angled spatula and you just start to spread it. Now if you don't have enough frosting for the sides, go back, add some more on top. Make sure you don't have crumbs on it, and then just start spreading it around the cake. And you just want to do that rocking motion again. If you're running out, make sure you wipe the crumbs off and then keep going until you are all the way around the cake. You'll notice that you can see through this. That is pretty normal with cream cheese frosting, especially if it's a chocolate cake. If I was doing this with just the cream cheese, I would probably add a little bit of swirl to it. Or if I wanted a smooth finish, I would do 1 layer very thinly. I'd put it in the refrigerator, and then I would let it set up so it was cold, and then I'd put another thin layer on top of that. Cream cheese you want to be able to keep cold in the refrigerator because if it's warm at all, it will melt, and though it will taste good, it will look terrible. So I am almost done frosting the sides of this cake. I'm also going to be adding some chocolate chips to the side, and I will show you how to do that in a moment. But just kind of finish this up. I'm doing it pretty thin, a lot thinner on the sides too, because it will be really sweet if I do it too thick. And of course, if you're a frosting person, that's not a big deal, and you'll eat it anyways. But if you're not, and it's too much for your sweet tooth, then you won't like it. And I'm rambling. So to get the top, you've noticed you've got edges that aren't finished. You want to take your spatula, angle it a little bit, and very lightly take that edge and pull it towards you, and that will take your edge away. Now don't worry if you mess up, because you can always add that frosting again and go over it. Just like that. And then if you want, just go around, play with it, see how it's showing through. Recover it, and then angle it. The reason why I like a turntable is because I can do this. It just makes it so much easier when you're trying to make your cake look nicer. And it's a lot faster than not having one. So if you're really into cakes, make sure this is one of the purchases that you do. There's a lot of frosting in the center of this, which I really don't want, so I'm slowly taking it away. And I do want to have somewhat of a smooth finish on top because I am ganaching it, and ganache is not very forgiving when it comes to what shows underneath. So you have to make sure you don't have a lot of crumbs showing, because it will show up and make your cake look rough. Again, swish and pull towards you. Now I make this look easy. It's just going to take some practice. You kind of have to be really light. I'm barely touching the cake, and that just comes with practice. So if you mess it up, just try it over again. You'll be fine. Okay, I'm going to take a break for a moment, and I will record how I make ganache. Okay, this next step is for my chocolate ganache. This is my absolutely favorite frosting. You can pour it over the cake as a clear finish or a nice chocolatey finish, or you can let it thicken and turn it into a frosting. First thing that you need to do is you need to have unsalted butter, heavy whipping cream. Do not substitute those two things. You cannot use margarine, salted butter. It just is a bad flavor. I had this frozen previously, so I actually pre-melted my butter. And then you want to add your heavy cream to this. Now once this heavy cream comes to a boil, just a slight simmer is when you want to take it off of your burner. And then you'll be adding it to your semi-sweet chocolate chips. You can use milk chocolate or white chocolate. I haven't tried white chocolate yet, but my favorite is the semi-sweet. And then you just want to let this sit here till it starts to simmer. My recipe for that, I always double everything. If I'm doing frosting for a cake, I double the recipe because I do not want to go back and remake it if I run out of it. So for my ganache, a single recipe is 3/4 cup of heavy whipping cream, 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter, and then you want 8 ounces of chopped up or semi-sweet chocolate chips. You want a wire whisk for this to use after you're done. And then once this starts to boil, I'm going to stir this just a little bit to kind of mix the butter with the cream. Once this starts to boil, I'm going to take it off and I'm going to immediately add it into my chocolate chips. If you want it to cool faster, freeze your chocolate chips, but no, it will cool pretty fast, and so you'll have to take that into consideration if you want to actually pour it over your cake. Once you pour it into your chocolate chips, you do have to wait about 5 minutes for the chocolate to melt, and then you can mix it. Once that's all done, you can add 1 tablespoon of cognac or brandy, which I don't do because I'm not an alcohol drink. I don't use alcohol in my food. Or what I do is I put the vanilla flavor. I have used orange flavoring before, which is really good. And pretty much use the flavor that you want. I'm going to pause this for just a moment. As you can see, it's starting to simmer around the edges. With cream or any kind of milk product, you have to watch it really closely, because if you do let it boil completely, all the air bubbles will come up and overflow and can start a fire on your stove. So if you're going to do this, please don't leave your food, because it will cause problems for you. It's starting to boil. You can see it's starting to bubble. It's not a full royal, but there it starts to go. Go ahead and turn off your stove, and then you take it and you want to pour it into your chocolate. I'm using a glass bowl just so you can see how this works. If I want the heat to retain a lot longer, then what I will do is set your timer for 5 minutes. What I'll do is I'll put it in a metal pan, and it'll actually keep it a lot more liquidy longer. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this until this chocolate is melted, and then I'll show you how to incorporate everything together. Okay, it's been 5 minutes. You can see the cream and the butter just sits on top. Now what you want to do is just slowly, in circular motions, start to stir this. You can see it's pretty liquidy. That's normal. You just keep stirring it until the chocolate starts to melt. Once it melts, it's going to become thicker. You'll see that chocolate starting to show through. And again, slow circular motions. And just scrape it around the side. You don't want to add your vanilla or whatever flavoring you're going to do till last, because it will cool your mixture. Just get up around the sides to make sure you get all that cream incorporated. You don't want any cream left over because it will show. And there is your ganache. You see it's pretty liquidy right now. As ganache sits, it does thicken. Right now, it's the consistency, very syrupy. I want it to cool a little bit more than this before I pour it on my frosting, on my cake, because if I don't, it will melt it. if I wasn't going to put any frosting on the cake, I would actually be okay to wait just a little bit or pour it directly on it. If you pour it directly on it with this thin consistency, it's just going to give a thin coating. If you want it thicker, definitely wait until it sets up. And that is my chocolate ganache recipe. I hope that was helpful. And if you have any questions, just feel free to email me. And I will wait for this to cool down a little bit more before I start adding it to my cake. Okay, I'm going to add some chocolate chips to the side. What I did is I got my food processor. Okay, I'm going to add some chocolate chips to the side. I did get my food processor and grind them up a little bit so they were smaller. I also am wearing not leather gloves. I'm wearing my plastic gloves because it does melt. And then you want to tilt your cake a little bit. This does get a little bit messy. You want to tilt it and just push into it. And as you can see, your chocolate chips will stick to the side. You just want to continue to do this all the way around the cake. Don't worry about getting it all the way to the top because I'm pouring the chocolate ganache on top of that. You can leave it like this and then just put a decoration on top, or you can add more things to it. So I will pause this for a second and I will get this taken care of. And I'll show you the end. I'm just finishing this up. I've got a little bit left to go. You kind of just, as you're pushing it, you want to push gently and roll it. Make sure your frosting is not crusted. You want to make sure it's a little bit sticky, otherwise your chocolate chips are just going to fall off. And that can be frustrating. I've had that happen to me before. So if your frosting does crust in between the time that you're taking care of this, then you want to make sure you refrost the outer edge so that it's soft. Once you have these chocolate chips embedded in the frosting, you can fill any gaps that there is, or you can just leave it natural with little gaps. That's fine. So you can see the chocolate is melting from my hands. Warmth. And then just find any gaps that you have and just fill it in. And then you can take your finger and just go around the edges and get any extra chocolate that has fallen off the frosting and just scoop it in your hand and put it back in your bowl. And then you can clean up the edge of your plate with a wet paper towel later. Look at all the melted chocolate. Okay. And then here you go. You've got the chocolate on the side of your cake. Okay, it's now time to chocolate ganache your cake. I like the consistency this is. I don't know if you can see this very good. It's just kind of soupy, a lot thicker. This is the consistency that I've been looking for to be able to do this. Now, ganaching the cake, you just start pouring. You see it's just really syrupy, and it spreads around, and then very gently take your brush or your paddle or your spoon or whatever you're going to use and slightly go over the cake. And I want this to be an uneven pattern, and so I'm just kind of pushing it out to the edge. If I need more ganache, I'm going to pour it on there. Be careful how much you put on because a little can go a long way. And just kind of keep going. You see how it just smooths out? This is why I like ganache. It kind of hides a lot of mistakes if you're not good at keeping an even frosting tone on the top. Do make sure it's a lot cooler though, because it will melt your frosting. I've had that happen before. And then you just gently turn your turntable and very lightly with your spoon paddle, just go over it. And there you go. That is how you ganache a cake. Let me just kind of show you. This is really hard to do one-handed. You can see the side, and I hope this is okay and that you can actually see the sheen of the cake and how smooth it is. I'm not done with this. I'm going to wait for the ganache to thicken a little bit because I need a frosting for the top decoration. So I'm going to pause it again for the next step. Okay, next step, your ganache. My ganache is totally the way I want it. It's very thick. It holds to my spatula. So you want to be able to put it in your piping bag with the tip that you choose. My favorite tip is the one I use for my cupcakes also. It is the Wilton 1M tip. It's a very large star tip, and it's my absolute favorite because it gives really good swirls. Once you have your bag filled, you just want to start decorating. For this particular cake, I'm actually going to just do some swirls. Don't go to the total edge because it'll droop over sometimes. And you just keep going until you are done. If you need to regroup because your hand's getting tired or you need to redo your bag, just start where you finished. And you just take it and go all the way around. Until you complete your circle. And that is how you pipe ganache on. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to fill my ganache. This is going to complete my cake except for a small little detail at the end which I will put on. I'm choosing raspberries for this. You can do chocolate covered strawberries, or you can just leave it plain, or you can do drizzled chocolate in the middle to add some interest and some artsy fartsy stuff. Just make it pretty. Whatever you want to do. And just kind of pile on the raspberries. Use all the remaining raspberries that you have. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to fill every chocolate space. Just kind of keep going until you are done. Which I almost am. Until you fill it to the very top. And then you want to, I'm going to add some white chocolate to it to add a little bit of color. You don't have to do that. It's just how I want it to look at the end. So to do that, you want to take your white chocolate. I like to use the Nestle brand. I like the flavoring of it. I like how it melts. Do your premium white morsels. You don't need very much of it because you're only going to be drizzling a small amount. So you just want to add maybe about that much. Now chocolate does burn in the microwave, so you want to be careful of that. I like to use either coconut oil or I use some Crisco to add to that. Just a little bit of a fingerful, just like that. And then you want to mix it together. The reason why I add that is because it helps the smoothness of your chocolate, and it'll help with the spreading and the drizzling. If you do without, it tends to be a lot thicker and it's not as easy to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the microwave. You want to do it in 10-second increments. Really keep an eye on it and stir it in between because, like I said, chocolate does burn. I'm going to pause. My chocolate's melted. As you can see, it's just kind of a nice, smooth, runny consistency. Not too runny. If you have too much shortening in it, it will become too runny, and then it won't solidify after it cools. And you just want to take a spoonful. If you don't want that big glop in the middle, have the glop right there, and then just start drizzling it on your cake. I like to go at different angles so it's not just all one position. Now you can go overboard with this. You can do whatever you want. Get a little messy with it. It'll impress anybody with your end result. And the chocolate is cooling, so it's harder for it to come off the spoon. So I have to put a little bit more on the spoon first before I can drizzle. Okay. I am done with this cake. All I have to do is clean up the edges. I hope that you can all see how it turned out. If you have any questions, hopefully you'll know where to find me, or somebody will. And I'll be back in just one moment. Hi, this is Ember again. I hope you enjoyed my tutorial on how to frost a cake. I hope this encourages you to do a little bit more with the A&S in AmpGuard, and that it'll encourage you to be able creative with what you're doing with your cakes. Thank you very much for your time. Bye-bye.